أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you, brothers and sisters, to another night of the programs of Imam Mahdi's Center. And we will continue our lessons on learning how to read the Quran. Tonight is our 5th lesson. And we are going to continue discussing the lowercase letters. If you remember, yesterday we discussed the first part of the lowercase letters. And we talked about how only certain letters have lowercase forms, and that's most of them. And that those that have lowercase forms, most of them have what we consider a top and a tail. So in order to make the lowercase form from the uppercase form, we keep the top of the letter with the dots if it has dots, and we drop the tails. So you see here in this chart, the letters that have lowercase forms with the tops and tails. And if we go to the next chart, we'll see the tops without the tails. And this was the summary of the discussion from last night. Tonight's discussion will cover 3 specific letters that have more than one lowercase form. So with the other letters that we discussed last night, with the exception of the ayn and the ghayn, all of the other letters in their lowercase form, they have just one lowercase form. But when it comes to these 3 letters, the ayn, the ghayn, and the ha, these 3 letters, each one of them has 3 lowercase forms, depending on how it connects with other letters. So for example, when one of these letters is at the beginning of a word, it has one type of lowercase form. It has another lowercase form when it's in the middle of a word, and it has another lowercase form when it's at the end of a word. What we mean by the beginning of a word is when it's the first letter and it connects to another letter on its left. And what we mean by the middle of the word is it connects on both the right and the left. And what we mean by the end of the letter is that it's the last letter of a word and there's a space after it. So when it's in the beginning, it has one form. When it's in the middle, it has one form. And it's when it's at the end of a word, it has a third form. So let's look at the ha, for example. The ha has 3 forms. This on the left is how the ha looks when it's all by itself, not connected to any other letter on the right or the left. When it's at the beginning, when it is at the beginning of a word, when it's the first letter, then it looks like this. This is what we were practicing writing last night. This is one of the difficult forms. This is how it looks in the beginning of a word. Now, when it's in the middle of a word, it has this second form. And when it's at the end of a word, then it has this form here. Now, why are there these different forms? Because of the connection to other letters. So when it's the first letter of a word, when it's at the beginning, it has this form here. And we have this little extension right here at the end of the letter that connects to the letter after it. So when it's in the middle of the word, now it needs 2 extensions. This is the one extension that connects it to the letter on the right. And this is the little extension that lets it connect to the letter on the left. And when it's at the end of a word, it's this connection on its right that connects it to that letter on the right. And then it itself is the last letter. So the ha has 3 forms. One at the beginning, one at the middle, and one at the end. And the way that we write these, if you remember from last night's lesson, we start from the top, come all the way around, and then cut through the middle and give a little extension so it can connect to the next letter. Now, when it's in the middle of a word, then we start from this little extension that it connected to the other letter with. We come down, and then we do the same thing that we did when we're writing the full form. Come up all the way, but this time it has a little sharp top, and then come down, and then form that extension for the next letter. And when it's at the end of the letter, we start from here, where it connects to the letter on the right. We come straight up, and then we form this curve to connect back. So those are the 3 forms of the ha, when they're at the beginning of a word, middle, and end. Now we're going to move on to the next letter. And that is the ayn. Now, as you'll see, the ayn and the ghayn have exactly the same forms. Let's go back to the ayn. We see here, this is the ayn when it's all by itself, not connected to any letter on the right or left. When it's at the beginning of a letter, when it's at the beginning of a word, it's the first letter of a word, then it has this form right here. Now, it can be sometimes confusing when we see this form. We might think that this looks like a hamza. If you remember, we're practicing writing the uppercase letters. We said we write the hamza like this. But then we say, wait a minute, that looks a lot like the ayn. If I were to write the lowercase of the ayn, it would be just like this. Now, this is something we're going to cover later on when we start connecting letters into words, but it's good to mention it now too, that the way we can tell the difference between a hamza and the lowercase form of the ayn is that this lowercase form of the ayn will always be connected to a letter after it, whereas the hamza always has a space before and it has a space after it. It never connects to another letter. So when we see this form, this right here, we know that this is ayn when it's connected to another letter after it. Hamza will not connect to another letter. So this is the lowercase form of the ayn. It's the top part without the tail portion. Now, what happens when the ayn is in the middle of a word? Then we have the second form, where it has an extension on the right, it has an extension on the left, and it has this kind of like a flattened circle as the head portion. So let's rewrite that again from scratch. We start from where it connects to the other letter, we form a flattened circle, and then we come back to form the extension for the next letter. So this is how the second form of the ayn is written, the lowercase form, when it is in the middle of a word. It connects over here and it connects over here. Now for the last form of the ayn. This is when it is the last letter of a word and it connects on the right side but not on the left side. So we write this in the same way that we write the middle form, where we start from where it connects with the other word, we draw this flattened half circle, and then we give it the same tail that it has when it's in its capital form. So it's a combination of the two. We draw the middle form, and then we give it that tail that it had when it was a capital letter. So now, once we learn how to write the ayn, and once we learn the lowercase forms for the ghayn becomes very easy. Why? Because it's the exact same thing, except we put a dot on every one. And let's look at that. See that? It's just one dot on top of each one of these. Here's the ayn, beginning of a word, middle of a word, end of a word, and then we go to the ghayn. All we're doing is we're adding one dot on top of the ayn to get the ghayn. So now you've learned the lowercase forms for all of the letters. And it was important for us to have a special lesson just for these three letters, the ayn, the ghayn, and the ha, because all of the other letters have just one lowercase form, but these three letters, each one of them have three lowercase forms. They have one at the beginning of a word, one in the middle, and one in the end, and these are the forms that they have, inshallah. So that is the end of our lesson for tonight.